This is the GCSE Business Studies revision video on human resource management, or in other words, people in business. The human resource management department of a business is involved with, first of all, the recruitment process. And the recruitment process will start with identifying a vacancy. So there is an opening in the job that needs to be filled. From the vacancy, the business will decide what the job will be. So they will write a job description and also a person specification. The job description describes the job. It tells the candidates what roles they'll be doing, what duties they will have, who they will report to, what the hours will be, any information relating to the job. The person specification will outline the kind of person that is required to do the job, and it will include their skills, their experience, their qualifications, and any other attributes that they should have. Once those two documents are drawn up, the company will devise a job advert. Now, they might advertise their job in the job centre, in a local newspaper, on the internet, lots of different places. But remember, when you're answering questions, you need to make sure you are suggesting somewhere that is appropriate to the job. So not a national television advert if it is a job in a corner shop. Your job advert also must be legal. So, for example, you can't request that you have a male between the age of 25 and 45 to do a particular job, unless the job actually requires it. You could, if you're looking for bar staff, you could say that they have to be over 18, because by law you have to be over 18 to serve alcohol. But otherwise, you cannot specify gender, age, or race or anything like that in a job advert. Once the job advert has gone out, the candidate is likely to complete an application form. Usually it's quite a long form, asks for personal details, experience, education. They might also ask for a CV, which is a curriculum vitae, similar kind of thing. You talk about your own personal qualities, your experience, your education background, qualifications, that sort of thing. Also, you will have to provide 2 references. These are recommendations from past employers or teachers or somebody that you have worked with before, and they can give a character reference of you to the new company. Once the company has received application forms from candidates, they will start the selection process. So they will shortlist people that they would like to interview. During an interview, normally you would sit in front of a panel of people from that job, and they will ask you lots of questions about your experience and about the job. Based on the outcome of the interview, the panel will choose the best person for the job and offer them the job. Once the business has chosen the best person for the job, they will start doing their training. Now, there are 3 types of training. The first type is called induction training. Now, induction training is the training you will receive in the very first few days of the job before you even start doing your duties as part of that job. It will include things like health and safety information. It will include what to do if there is a fire alarm, and any kind of things to do with working in the business, in that particular building, how to use particular machinery and equipment, that kind of thing. Your very basic training that you have to have before you even start your job. Second type of training is on-the-job training. That is where you are taught to do your job while you're actually doing the job. So you could be shadowing somebody, working alongside somebody else while they are working. You need to know for your exam the advantages and the disadvantages. So the advantages are it's quite cheap. Okay, they don't have to pay to send you off to a course somewhere or anything like that. It's quite cheap to do, and you get to know the job quite well, quite quickly. However, you may learn bad habits. If you are learning from somebody who's been in the job for quite a long time, they might have picked up all sorts of shortcuts and things like that. And you could also make mistakes. Because you're new to the job, you are actually doing the job while you're training, so you could make all sorts of mistakes while you are doing that. Now, the third type is off-the-job training. And that is where you train away from the job. So you're sent on a course for a day, or you go to a college for a day or a week or whatever it is. Now, the good things about that is that you are trained by experts, and you're trained to do that job properly because you're trained by somebody outside the organisation who is going to do a professional job at training you. So experts, less likely to make mistakes, so production is not held up, because the problem with on the job is while you are learning, you're going to be working quite slow to start with. It could hold up production. If you're not there and you come back already trained, production isn't held up at all. However, there are some advantages. It's quite expensive to send people off on a course, and it's not necessarily specific to that business. You might learn how to do the job, but it might be slightly different to how you'd actually do it in that actual business. Now, when a business employs people, they are bound by different types of law. There are 4 sections of law that you need to be aware of. One is that you would have a contract of employment. Now, anybody who works should have a contract of employment, and that's a contract between the business you work for and you that sets out your exact duties, what you have to do, and how much you should be paid for it and how you should be rewarded for it and things like that. It will also include your holiday entitlement, and it is agreed between yourself and the employer, signed by both parties, and neither of you should breach that contract. If you do, you could face disciplinary action. There are also laws relating to the dismissal of workers. And that means getting rid of workers, firing workers. Now, if you have been stealing from the business, for example, or you are always absent and you haven't really got very good reasons for it, you're not doing the work that's set out in your contract of employment, they are fair reasons for you to be dismissed. So if you break the contract, if you break what is outlined in your contract of employment, you could be dismissed or fired from the business. However, there is something called unfair dismissal, where if you think that you have been sacked or fired unfairly, perhaps because there is a personality clash with you and a manager, or somebody is sacking you because you're a man or a woman, or because of your race or a disability or an age or something like that, you could take the business to a tribunal and say that you think you have been unfairly dismissed. The third type of law that protects employees is health and safety law. Now that says that while you're at work, the business that you work for has to do everything they can to make sure that you are safe and that no harm will come to you. So for example, businesses that run big production lines and use lots of equipment have to provide protective equipment. So overalls, steel toe cap boots, safety goggles, that kind of thing. And there is also a law that says any accidents at the workplace must be reported, and then they are investigated to make sure that the business wasn't at fault. The fourth category, and perhaps one of the biggest, is equal opportunities. Now this basically means being treated fairly at work, and it includes laws such as the Age Discrimination Act, the Disabilities at Work Act, Race Discrimination, Race Relations Act, and they all say that at work everybody is treated fairly regardless of your gender or your age or your race. Trade unions are organisations that represent the views of employees to the employer. So they are organisations from outside the business who represents the views and the rights of the worker. There are lots of recognised trade unions, and you should know some of them. You've probably heard of the National Union of Teachers. And they are an organisation that represent teachers in terms of making sure that they have good conditions at work. They represent people on issues such as pay, to make sure people are fairly paid, working conditions, to make sure people have good working conditions. They might get involved if a company has announced some redundancies, to make sure that that is all above board, and they might also implement industrial action. Now that means that a whole industry or a whole group of staff take action against the employer for some reason. And there are a few different ways of doing that. They will negotiate with your bosses on your behalf if you think you're not being paid fairly or your working conditions are poor. They might also organise a work to rule, which is where people who work for you just do exactly what is set out in that contract of employment. They don't do anything else, they don't do any favours for anybody, don't go out of their way, they just do exactly what they are paid to do and nothing extra. And of course, you all know about strike action. Okay, so if through negotiations and through other things, the worker and the business can't come to an agreement, they might organise a strike, which is where workers don't go to work for a day. They don't get paid either, they give up a day's pay, but they are on strike. organisation structure shows how the business is put together in terms of its staff. So normally you'd have a board of directors or a director at the top of the organisation who may have some deputies or some assistant managers who may then lead small teams of people who each in turn may have more staff underneath them. So the organisation structure just sets out how the organisation is put together. It shows who is responsible for what, who manages who, and how the organisation works, really. And just a couple of points to add to that. A couple of key terms that you need. Span of control, first of all. So span of control is the number of people a person is directly responsible for. So the span of control of this person here is 3. The span of control of this person here is 5. And the span of control of this person here is 2, because he or she is responsible directly for 2 people. There is also something called the chain of command. Which shows communication lines within the organisation. So for this person here to communicate with the boss at the top of the organisation, the chain of command goes this way. So there are 3 people involved in that chain of command. Also 3 people involved in the chain of command of this person. So it shows the lines of communication through an organisation. In a tall organisation, there are more levels of hierarchy and each person then has a smaller span of control, whereas in a flat organisation, there are less levels of hierarchy with wider spans of control. Communication is really important in business so that everybody knows what it is they are aiming for and to make sure everybody's on the right track to achieve their goals. Communication can be internal, which is with people who work for the business, or it could be external, which would normally be with your customers and your suppliers. External communication tends to be more formal than internal communication. Communication methods could be written or verbal, or more and more these days businesses are making good use of ICT to communicate. So they might use email, video conferencing to have meetings with people across the world, and they use social media like Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Pause the video now and make a list of internal and external methods of communication. The answers will be on the next slide. Compare your answers to the ones on the slide. The next topic is motivation. Motivation is really important to encourage your staff to work hard and do the best job that they can possibly do. In lessons, we looked at 4 different motivation theories. So we looked at Taylor, who said that motivation is all about money and that to get people to work hard, you just need to pay them. Mayo said that motivation is all about socialising. So he said that if you treat your staff well, get them to work in groups and teamwork, maybe a staff party or 2, they'll be happy bunnies and they will work well. Hertzberg said that motivation is all about getting the working conditions right. And he said that these are non-financial factors, and once you've got the heating and the lighting and the basic facilities and working conditions right, then people will become motivated by other things such as maybe money, but also things such as praise, recognition, people saying thank you for your hard work, that kind of thing. Maslow came up with a hierarchy of needs. So he had this triangle with different levels. I'm sure you remember doing this. Right at the bottom, you've got your basic needs. And he says that until your basic needs, such as food, warmth, shelter, water, that kind of thing, are satisfied, then you can't move up to the next level. And on the next level up, you have got security needs. So job security, somewhere safe to live, a little bit of financial stability. Once that is sorted, you can move up to social. So your social needs, your relationships with people at work and people at home as well. He says that until you've got good working relationships and everything in your life is quite good, then you can move up to the next two. We've got self-esteem. Okay, and self-esteem is all about being good at what you do, and somebody praising you for it, telling you you're doing a really good job, makes you feel quite good. And at the very top, we have got self-actualization. And this means achieving your goals, achieving the goals you've set for yourself, such as getting an A star in your GCSE business studies. So those are 4 motivational thinkers with 4 very different theories, all of which are used in businesses today. Pause the video and make a list of financial and non-financial methods of motivation. Compare your answers to the ones on the slide. When we looked at leadership, we looked at 3 different leadership styles. So we looked at autocratic leadership, we looked at democratic leadership, and we looked at laissez-faire leadership. So autocratic leadership is where the manager gives instructions. He or she doesn't listen to other people's opinions. They just say, this is what you're doing, this is how you're going to do it, and the deadline is this. So very specific, very straightforward. You just have to do what you're told. Democratic leaders will a democratic leader will discuss issues and decisions and will take on the views of the staff and make a decision based on what other people have said and what other people think. So there's a bit more discussion. People might have a vote on things so that everybody has a say in what's going on. Laissez-faire is a French term, and it actually means leave them to it. So it's a very laid-back kind of management leadership where the workers are just left to get on with whatever they're doing. What I would like you to do is pause the video and write the advantages and disadvantages of each of those leadership styles. One of the most obvious ways to motivate a worker is to pay them, and you need to know the difference between a wage and a salary. Wages are normally paid hourly, so you get an hourly rate. They're often paid to manual workers and casual workers, and that amount of pay must meet the national minimum wage. A salary is an annual rate or a yearly rate. Normally it's just divided by 12 and paid monthly, and is normally paid to managers, office staff, administrators. This is an example of a pay slip. You can see that in the green circle you've got your total pay or your gross pay. In the red circle you've got your total deduction, so the amount that's taken out of the pay, and then in the blue you've got the net pay, so what the person gets at the end of the month. This is a question from the 2014 paper. Have a go at calculating the gross and the net pay. That's the end of the human resources section, and all that's left to say is good luck.